Hi everyone, welcome back to Case Borrow. Today I'll be filming a May wrap-up video, so I'll be talking about the books that I read throughout the course of May. So May was a final exam period for me, so I wasn't able to read as much as I wanted to, but I still got through some great books, so I'm really excited to be filming this video, so let's get into it. The first book I read in May was Carol by Patricia Highsmith. I had watched the beautiful film with Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara almost over a decade ago when I was in college. Time really flies, doesn't it? So I've always kind of wanted to read this book, but I'm a terrible book reader and my TBR just kept expanding and expanding, so I couldn't get to this book until now. And I'm really glad that I did because this book was really worth reading. So I think Highsmith's writing is also really beautiful, but also I think that what really makes this book special are the characters. So I think that the two main characters, Carol and Therese, whose love is the central plot of this story, are both very lonely people. However, they are in different stages of their lives and they manifest that loneliness in very different ways. So Therese, I think Therese is very young and she really shows that by manifesting her emotions and her loneliness in a very definite way. But Carol is older and a bit more mature. And I think throughout her life, she has understood that nothing is quite so definite. And I think this quote really shows how Carol manifests her loneliness. Therese is telling Carol that she's not very close to her mother and that she has always felt guilty about receiving things from her mother to whom she feels like she cannot love. And here Carol says that when you forget about paying her back, then you'll be an adult. So for Carol, who has experienced more of a life, she understands that nothing is quite so definite, and I think that in this scene, Carol has felt that Therese, because of her youth, feels like everything has to be kind of like a one-to-one give and take. But I think that Carol kind of realizes that life is not so clear. And I think that was a really interesting scene of how these two women are so similar in their loneliness, but also they manifest that loneliness in a very different way. So this book was written in the 1950s, and so it perhaps could not have ended a happy ending. So the two women in the end continue their relationship, but this is not a happy ending where they like just fall in love and then they just continue their love and it's all a happy go merry ending, because Carol, because of her decision to continue this relationship and because of who she is as a lesbian, she loses everything, including custody to her daughter, as well as perhaps an aspect of her social dignity. And the way that Carol loses that social dignity was really affecting, and it reminded me of the utopia that Walt Whitman kind of imagined when he said that if all love had been possible without artifices or rules or trusts or any argument. And obviously, like for LGBTQ plus people, that has not been the case. There had to be a Supreme Court case, which I cannot believe this, but I cannot remember the name of. I will put it down below for the US, and here in Korea, it is still not illegal for two gay people to marry. And I think there is something about two people being in love and the fact that they have to fight to be in love. And I think that kind of hurts people's dignities a bit. Obviously, it's a good thing that people still fought and they gained certain rights. But I think because it was fought for, it's just like It's just like that love is never for certain, and I feel like we feel like those rights can be taken away as well. The next book that I read was Pastoralia by George Saunders. I think I had mentioned this when I was in my book haul video, but I got this for $1 in my local bookstore nearby my law school. So, but I was kind of doubtful as to whether I would actually enjoy this book because just subjectively for me, the cover looks kind of boring with this elk here. I think it's called an elk. And the title also is called Pastoralia. So I thought it might be kind of like a very quiet landscape description type of stories. But let me tell you this book is very far from boring. And I think it was a very good introduction to this author, George Saunders, who apparently is a very famous author who I did not know at all. But I can understand why he is very popular. I think he crafts his short stories incredibly well. I especially liked the odd numbered short stories. So Pastoralia, Sea Oak, and The Barber's Unhappiness. I also love the last story as well. These are all like short stories, so I won't spoil anything, but the titular first story, so the first story is called Pastoralia, is a hilarious dystopian novel about, it is actually hilarious. So basically imagine the movie A Night at the Museum, and like, you know how there the monuments and like the things at the museum kind of came to life. So basically in this dystopian world, the main character is working kind of as a caveman that is like mimicking the life of cavemen for a historical museum. And like this museum is also falling apart, and I think it's going through a rough patch, so everyone just keeps getting fired. And it's a story of the main character trying to like keep his job because his son is sick, and like it's kind of like one of those very bittersweet story, but it also makes you laugh quite a lot. So again, this was a really good book as well. I think I just read a lot of good books in May, so that was really great. The third book of May that I read was Housekeeping. I think this might have been the one book that I wasn't quite satisfied with in the month of May. I was really so I've been kind of wanting to read Marilynne Robinson and her Robinson's books for quite a while. So when I saw this book on the $1 shelf in my local bookstore, where I got Pastoralia also from, I had to get this, so I got this. I didn't really enjoy this book. So I think the one critical problem that I had with this book was that I actually really loved how the author kind of describes things. She describes this very isolated village where the main characters live. The main characters are very young children. They're called like Ruth and her sister. The main characters are Ruth, and there's also her sister Lucille. And then after her mother abandons them to her grandmother, and the grandmother dies, her aunt, the main character's aunt, Sylvia, comes to live with them and then to apparently care for them. I'll talk about this a bit later too, but so the critical problem that I had with this book was that while I love the descriptions that of the village that was in the like first half of the book, as I mentioned, in the last half of the book, so it seems that suddenly, like not even suddenly, like Robinson's voice, the author's voice, just completely dominates the whole story. So it ends up being like a speech from Robinson rather than the story that was going on. So Marilynne Robinson's voice completely overtakes Ruth's voice that was narrating the story in the first place, and also dominates Lucille's story as well as Sylvia's story, which the Aunt Sylvia story, which had been 10 years at best, even in the beginning. I think just Sylvia is kind of like a symbolic character at best. So she's not a real person. She just exists as a shadow in this story, and that was a problem for me. Yeah. So at the end of the book, especially, I felt like the author was just shouting and shouting at the reader that the message is here and that we must listen to her. And like she uses a lot of biblical allusions. They are beautiful. The sentences in this book are beautiful. Robinson, I think, writes really beautifully. But again, this is a novel and there was a story that was going on that Robinson just completely overtakes at the end. It almost felt like the author was putting herself forward instead of her art. And I think, in my opinion, that does not give any opportunity for a good literature to appear. Yeah. And and the message I didn't like either. Like, maybe this is because I'm young and like I have certain black and white notions. For me, Sylvia was unforgivable. The way that she completely abandons the children that she is taking care of, and the way that they just completely Sylvia just persuades, I guess, like Sylvia kind of bewitches Ruth, the main character, the narrator, to follow her into wherever, to unknown, to wandering wherever without any education. That was unforgivable for me. So maybe that was also why I didn't like this book as much. But again, that was not the critical problem for me. If this book was written well enough, I would have still been okay with this book. But again, like the critical problem with this book for me was that the author completely overtakes the novel. And if she wanted to do that, why didn't she write an essay, right? Then I read Ducks 2 Years in the Old Sands by Kate Britton. Here I want to shout out Lawrence Dabbs, the BookTube channel, Lawrence Dabbs book list. This graphic novel was recommended to me through the video Canada Race 2026. I will leave link to the video in my description. So Ducks is a rather depressing story about the author who goes to work in the oil sands in Alberta, Canada, to pay off her college loans. The work in the oil sands is very grueling. The workers, the vast majority of whom are male, continuously throw harassing, misogynistic comments at her. But also they are working in the oil sands because they have nowhere else to go, because they weren't able to get the education to work anywhere else. Moreover, the oil sands are operating in stolen lands from Canada's Indigenous communities. So basically, the oil sands are a quicksand of despair. I really love this. I really found this graphic novel to be very effective because the author was able to be very vulnerable about her experiences while also putting the necessary distance between her experiences and herself to be able to tell an effective story, including in experiences where I can't imagine how she was able to do that, because in the old sands she goes through some really harrowing experiences, but throughout the graphic novel there is a definitely somber but also a quick humor and wit that is just consistent and makes the graphic novel very readable. So again, this was another good one, guys, and I really do recommend this graphic novel, so check it out. final 2 books left, but wait. So why am I celebrating in this kind of weird way? This is not my birthday, but I am celebrating my bragging rights. And I have this bragging right because last month in May, I finished Herman Melville's Moby Dick. And I know that this book is on many people's list to be read before they die. If I had such a list, I think that book would have also been on my list. Just because, I don't know, like many people consider it their own white whale. But I did it, yo. I finished the book. And all jokes aside, I really love the book. And I do think the book just gets a bad rap because of how much of a height the book gets put on. It is definitely a great book. When I was reading it, it was one of those books when you are reading it, you can just feel that it is a great book and it is something incredibly special, and that is why it is on the many canon lists, or like many people's like TBR list forever and ever. I had thought, so basically I think for this review, for this short review, I could almost make a whole video about Moby Dick, but for this short review that I'm doing, I think it would be best to kind of compare and contrast the expectations that I had before I went into the book, and then what I thought about the book after I finished it. So I had thought 3 things about the books, about Moby Dick, before I began reading it. So first, I had thought that it would be difficult and incredibly boring. Second, that it is not about whaling, that Moby Dick is an allegory for some larger, grander meaning. And finally, that Moby Dick is about a mad captain in pursuit of a so-called bloodthirsty whale. I think after reading this book, in my opinion, none of these 3 quite popular, I think these 3 thoughts are quite popular reviews about Moby Dick, but I don't think any of them are true. So first of all, I didn't find the book to be ever excessively boring. I mean, it is a longer book. It's not incredibly long, unlike War and Peace, which was almost like 1,300 pages. I think it was about like 700 pages, which is basically the length of Notre Dame de Paris, which I didn't consider to be a very long book. It's not a short book, but it's not a very long book. So I didn't find Moby Dick to be excessively long. I didn't find it to be excessively boring or difficult. There are certain parts of the book where it gets difficult, especially the chapter The Coin, where just the characters start talking in Shakespearean Shakespearean like soliloquies. That chapter was the one chapter that I had a lot of difficulty just understanding, and that I had to read twice to completely get. Although I don't know if I completely got the book at all, but it is not boring at all. At least the book is filled with like grand Shakespearean language and jokes, and many of the jokes obviously are about the male appendage. There are long passages of encyclopedic passages where nothing related to the plot goes on, and it is basically Melville explaining things about the whale or the whaling industry. I didn't find those parts boring either, just because of the things that I mentioned, the Shakespearean language and the dick jokes, basically. I hope I can say that, right? Yeah. And then the second thing, many people say that Moby Dick is not about a whale. I am curious about the statement. if Moby Dick were not about whales, why would Melville spend almost a third of the book talking about whales and the whale industry? I understand that this book also has some symbolic meaning, and I kind of got that, but those whaling passages, those whaling chapters are too beautifully, too exquisitely written for the book not to be about whales. So yeah, so Moby Dick is about whales. Yeah. And finally, the final expectation that I had, which was that Moby Dick is about a mad captain trying to capture a bloodthirsty whale. That statement is also not true. So Ahab obviously is a mad captain, and his madness comes through, and it is horrifying, and it is terrifying, and it is, oh my god, it is wonderful to read. It is awesome in all senses of the it is awesome and awful in the full sense of the term. But I don't think the white whale can be called bloodthirsty, especially when the whale only attacked Ahab and ate his bit of his leg after Ahab tried to hunt the whale. So for the whale to not be bloodthirsty, did the whale just have to accept his death? That was yeah. I mean, I don't think even Melville was saying that, but just the expectation that this is about the mad captain failing to capture actually the bloodthirsty whale. I think my expectation was wrong in that way. But like I said, I could talk on and on about this book, but I won't, just because I have another book to talk about in this video. And I guess if I get a chance, I would like to make a whole separate video on the novel, because I do have a lot to talk about. So stay tuned for that, maybe. Next, I read Nox by Anne Carson. I had shown this book in its whole glory in my book haul video. Again, it's this very unwieldy accordion of a book where you kind of have to imagine it as an object, and the author kind of describes it as a replica of an epitaph that she made for her brother. So the brother had run away to escape capture by police to Copenhagen, and basically not Knox, but Anne Carson is Canadian. So the brother escaped to Copenhagen and was in flight without any news or letter to Carson's family. And then after her mother, who had long waited for her brother's return, dies, Anne Carson receives notice that her brother has died. And this book is an emotional journey that Anne Carson kind of goes on to find out the truth about how the brother died and how his life was leading up to that life. And yeah, I do think this book was really unique. In here, she has a lot of references. First of all, she in this emotional journey, she's also translating Catullus' poetry, in which Catullus is mourning his own brother. So, and in doing so, she kind of gives us, the reader, piece by piece translation of each word, so that we have to piece together in the same way that she kind of had to piece together to find out whatever truth that she could about her brother and his death. So, and then it also kind of contains pieces of Carson's own poetry, which was also beautiful. Other than that, it contains Carson's notes about translation, her notes and memories about her brother, the pieces of letters that her brother sent to her family, and also the letter that her mother sent to him as well. Yeah. I thought this book was really beautiful. The lack of objective meaning can be kind of frustrating, and it can, I think sometimes it can seem even self-indulgent on the author's part, but this book was rather short. I think you can read this book in one day if you were wanting to do that. I think you can also kind of stretch it apart and like read it in a very long period of time. I tended to read it in one day because I have no patience, but I think this was very affecting. This was very emotional. This was very beautiful. And I think, yeah. I just realized I have one more book that I read in May. And yeah, I cannot believe I forgot this book. Yeah, but I guess after reading reading The Emotional Anchors and Notes, I guess I wanted to take a complete left turn. I think it might have been my graduation blues. But my final book of May was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. This book is very famous, and it also has a very famous film, so I'm sure most of you guys know what the book is about. But it is about this Wall Street guy living just the shallowest existence, and he just gets bored with this very shallow life that he's living, which he curated, by the way, so he has no one else to blame. So to combat the ennui, he begins to brutally murder people, mostly women. Yeah, it is a very violent read. I won't explain or describe the scenes to you, but yeah, I think there should, not that there should be, but like, I guess like trigger warning violence. But I read the book and then I watched the movie because I knew that the movie was very famous. I really liked the book as well as the movie. The book was really hilarious and funny. I think I actually liked the movie a bit better. I think the themes were clearer, and there was a feeling that I had that the book was a bit too long. There are some like stream of consciousness parts where I thought it worked in some parts, and then sometimes it just got too long, and then I felt like the author was indulging himself a bit too much. So I actually enjoyed the movie a bit better, but the book is also great, so I do recommend it. Yeah, this was a really fun and twisted way to end the month of May, so yeah. And so that's it for my May reading wrap up. I hope you enjoyed it. Come back soon for more videos on In Case Borrow. Bye!